The air at Creech Air Force Base in Nevada had a bite to it, a dry desert chill that promised scorching heat by noon. For Captain Eva Rostova, it felt like a cold welcome. Stepping out of the transport vehicle, she pulled her olive-drab duffel bag over her shoulder and took her first look at her new home. It wasn't much. A collection of beige buildings shimmered under the vast, empty sky, surrounded by miles of flat, dusty earth. It was a place where careers went to die, a forgotten corner of the Air Force where the new, shiny toys rarely made an appearance. Eva didn't mind. She preferred the quiet. At 32, she had seen enough of the world to appreciate a little bit of boring. Her transfer paperwork described her as a competent pilot with a steady, if unremarkable, record. A support pilot, mostly flying cargo and transport planes. Solid, reliable, safe. That's what the file said. And that's all anyone needed to know. As she walked toward the main hangar, the whispers started. They were quiet at first, just curious glances from the ground crew and mechanics. But as she entered the cavernous space, the sounds became more distinct. A low chuckle here, a muttered comment there. This was the home of the 77th Tactical Fighter Squadron, the Vipers, a unit filled with hotshot pilots who flew the latest F-35s. They were young, arrogant, and almost exclusively male, and they were not impressed. Well, look what we have here, a loud voice boomed, cutting through the hangar's noise. Eva turned. A tall, handsome pilot with a swagger in his step was walking toward her. His flight suit was adorned with patches, and the name tag read Madge, Jake Cobra Sullivan. He was the squadron leader, a man whose ego was as famous as his flying. He stopped in front of her, looking her up and down with a smirk. A few other pilots gathered behind him, like hyenas backing up their leader. Captain Rostova, I presume? Cobra said, not bothering to offer a handshake. Read your file. Lots of hours in a C-130. Bet you can park that big girl on a dime. A wave of laughter rippled through his audience. Ava's face remained neutral. She had learned long ago that reacting was a sign of weakness. That's right, Major, I can. Her calm reply seemed to annoy him. He wanted a reaction. He wanted her to be flustered, intimidated. This is a little different from hauling boxers. Captain, he continued, his voice dripping with condescension, we fly fighters here, real ones. Things get fast. Things get dangerous. You sure you're up for it? I'm sure I'll manage, Eva said, her voice even. Cobra's smirk tightened. We'll see. He turned to the other pilots. All right, boys, show's over. Let's not scare the new girl away on her first day. He walked off, leaving Eva standing alone in the middle of the hangar. The message was clear. She was an outsider, a token, a box checker for some diversity initiative. She wasn't one of them. Her commanding officer, Colonel Thompson, was a man who looked as tired as the desert landscape. His office was small and cluttered, filled with the scent of stale coffee. He glanced at Ava's file, then up at her, his eyes weary. Look, Captain, he began, sighing. I'm going to be straight with you. I didn't ask for this transfer. My squadron is a fine-tuned machine. The men here? They can be a little rough around the edges. They trust each other with their lives, and that trust is earned, not given. I understand, sir, Eva said. Just keep your head down. Do your job, and stay out of trouble, he said, his tone making it clear he doubted she could. We have a spare jet for you. She's an older model, an F-16. Been a while since she's seen any real action. The boys call her the Tin Can. He was giving her the squadron's hen meat, the oldest, most neglected plane on the base. It was another insult, a way of putting her in her place. She'd do just fine. Colonel Eva replied, without a hint of disappointment. Later that day, a young, friendly-faced mechanic named Specialist Miller showed her to the jet. It was parked in a forgotten corner of the tarmac, away from the sleek, menacing F-35s. The paint was faded, and a long, thin scar ran along the fuselage. A poorly patched-up reminder of some past damage. Don't mind the name, ma'am, Miller said, wiping his greasy hands on a rag. She's got good bones, just needs a little love. Eva ran a hand along the jet's wing, feeling the cool metal under her fingertips. She looked into the cockpit. It was a mess of analog dials and switches, a far cry from the digital glass cockpits of the newer planes. It felt familiar. It felt like home. She's perfect, Eva said, a genuine smile gracing her lips for the first time that day. For the next 2 weeks, Eva became a ghost. She awoke before dawn, spending hours with Miller and the ground crew, learning every inch of the tin can. She ran diagnostics, cleaned connections, and calibrated the instruments herself. The other pilots would see her on their way to the simulators or the briefing room, her hands covered in grease, and they would snicker, playing mechanic now, Captain. One of them called out one morning, leave that to the enlisted men. Eva just ignored them. She knew the most important relationship a pilot has is with their machine. You had to know it, trust it, understand its language. While they were practicing on perfect simulators, she was learning the soul of her aircraft. The day of her first training flight arrived. It was a simple drill, a 4-ship formation exercise. Cobra was leading, of course, with his 2 most trusted wingmen. Eva was assigned the 4th position, the tail end Charlie, meant to just follow along and not get in the way. As they walked to their jets, Cobra couldn't resist one last jab. Try to keep up, Rostova, he said, loud enough for everyone. To hear, the button for the landing gear is the one on the left. Don't want you getting confused. The other pilots howled with laughter. Eva simply put on her helmet, her expression unreadable behind the dark visor. She climbed into the cockpit of the tin can, the familiar scent of oil and old metal enveloping her. She strapped herself in, her movements precise and economical. Pre-flight check was a symphony of clicks and switches. She spoke to the plane in a low, calm voice, a habit from long ago. All right, old girl, let's show them what we can do. The engines of the F-35S roared to life with a clean, modern whine. Then, the tin can's engine coughed, sputtered, and finally ignited with a deep, guttural roar that was a full octave lower than the others. It sounded angry. Cobra's voice crackled over the comms. Sounds like you're starting a lawnmower. Over there, Rostova Eva didn't reply. She taxied onto the runway, her movements smooth and confident. The 4 jets took off in sequence. The F-35s sliced through the air with effortless grace. The tin can, however, seemed to struggle. It lumbered into the sky, its wings wobbling slightly as it fought for altitude. In the air, the mockery continued. Hey Cobra, your new wingman is falling behind. One of the pilots said. She's flying like my grandmother drives, another added. Just focus on the drill, Cobra commanded, though the amusement in his voice was obvious. Rostova, your job is to stay in this patch of sky. Don't wander off. We'll be back for you after we've done the real work. They were treating her like a student driver told to stay in the parking lot. They flew off, their advanced jets disappearing into the sun, leaving Eva to circle lazily in her designated airspace. She didn't mind. It gave her time to feel the plane. She tested its roll rate, its throttle response, the subtle vibrations in the airframe. The tin can wasn't sleek or graceful, but it was honest. It told you exactly what it was doing. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the comms, sharp and urgent. It was the base controller. All Vipers, all Vipers. This is Tower. Scramble, scramble, scramble. We have an unscheduled event. I repeat, this is not a drill. Cobra's voice was instantly all business. Tower, this is Viper-led. What's the situation? We have a bogey, the controller said, his voice tight with tension. Fast mover. Breached restricted airspace from the north, heading south. High altitude, moving at Mach 2. No transponder, no response to hails. An unidentified aircraft, moving at twice the speed of sound, was heading right for them. The 3 F-35s banked hard, their afterburners kicking in as they raced to intercept Rus. Stay put, Cobra ordered. This is out of your league. We'll handle it. Eva watched as their icons on her radar screen moved to intercept the mysterious dot that had just appeared. She held her position as ordered, her knuckles white on the control stick. She could hear the frantic chatter between the other pilots. As they tried to get a visual, I've got nothing. Where is it? My sensors are blank. It's like it's a ghost. Then, the controller's voice came back, laced with a new, terrifying urgency. Viper-led, be advised. The bogey is no longer at high altitude. It's right on top of you. The calm of the training exercise shattered into a million pieces. Over the comms, the confident swagger of the Viper pilots evaporated, replaced by sharp, confused shouts. What do you mean, it's on top of us? Cobra demanded, his voice tight. There's nothing here. The sky is empty. Negative. Viper-led, the base controller insisted, his own voice straining to remain professional. My screen shows it. It's a dancing between you. From her position miles away, Eva watched the 4 radar icons, 3 advanced F-35s, and 1 unidentified bogey. The controller was right. The bogey was a phantom, a blur of motion that flickered between the 3 jets, moving with a speed and agility that seemed to defy physics. It was like a wolf weaving through a flock of sheep, too fast to be seen, too close for comfort. I've got a lock. One of the pilots, Calcine Razor, yelled. Wait, lost it. It's gone. It's toying with us. Another pilot, Slick, muttered, a note of disbelief in his tone. This is impossible. No aircraft can move like that. Cobra was getting angry, his frustration boiling over the radio. Stay in formation. Box it in. Don't let it get behind you. But the orders were useless. How do you box in a ghost? The bogey was executing maneuvers that shouldn't be possible, making 90-degree turns at supersonic speeds without losing momentum. The F-35, for all its technology and power, was designed to fight enemies that followed the laws of aerodynamics. This thing was breaking all the rules. Rostova, I said, stay put. Cobra barked, noticing her icon had drifted slightly closer. I'm holding my position. Major Eva replied, her voice a stark contrast to the rising panic in the others. It was calm, steady, almost serene. She wasn't just watching the radar. She was analyzing. She ignored the impossible speed, the physics-defying turns. Instead, she looked for a pattern. Everything has a pattern, a rhythm. Every pilot, every machine, has a tell. You just have to be patient enough to see it. The bogey would make a hard run at one of the F-35s, forcing the pilot to take evasive action, and then, in the split second, the formation was broken. It would vanish, only to reappear on the opposite side. It was using their own reactions against them. It was predicting their moves. It's anticipating me. Razor shouted in frustration as the bogey faked a pass, then pulled an inverted climb that left him staring at empty sky. How does it know what I'm going to do? The flight computer is predictive, Eva said quietly, almost to herself. But her microphone was open, her voice cut through the chaos, and for a second, there was silence. What did you say, Cobra snapped. Your flight control systems, sir, Eva explained, her tone still maddeningly calm. They're designed to assist you, to smooth out your maneuvers and prevent stalls. The bogey isn't reading you, it's reading your jet. It knows the computer's logic. It knows how the plane will react before you do. A stunned silence followed. On the ground, Colonel Thompson leaned closer to the speaker, listening intently. What the cargo pilot was saying made a terrifying kind of sense. Their greatest strength, their advanced technology, had become their biggest weakness. So what do you suggest, Captain? Cobra asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. We turn off our computers and flap our arms. You have to be unpredictable, Eva said simply. Fly manually. Do something the computer wouldn't expect, something inefficient. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard, Cobra shot back. We fly by the book for a reason. Rostova, this isn't some in your flying pickup truck. But his words lacked conviction. He knew she was right. They were being outthought, outflown. The bogey made another pass, this time directly at Cobra. He reacted instantly, pulling his F-35 into a steep climb. And just as Eva predicted, the bogey mirrored him, anticipating the move perfectly, positioning itself in his blind spot. I can't shake him, Cobra grunted, the strain audible in his voice. Eva watched her radar. Cobra was in trouble. The bogey was now locked onto his tail, and it wasn't letting go. This was no longer a game of cat and mouse. The cat had caught the mouse. Viper, lead. I'm breaking formation, Eva announced, her voice leaving no room for argument. Negative, Rostova, that's an order. You stay back, Cobra yelled, but the tin can was already moving. Eva pushed the throttle forward, and the old jet's engine roared in response. It didn't have the sleek acceleration of the F-35's, but it had raw, untamed power. The plane shuddered as it broke the sound barrier, a protest from the old airframe. Damn it, Rostova, I will have you court-martialed for this, Cobra screamed. Eva ignored him. Her eyes were glued to her instruments and the radar display. She wasn't flying toward the fight, she was flying away from it, banking hard to the east, toward the jagged peaks of the Spring Mountains that rose from the desert floor. What is she doing? Slick asked, bewildered. She's running away. She's panicking, Cobra spat. The pressure got to her. I knew she couldn't handle it. On the ground, Colonel Thompson watched the icons on the main screen, his knuckles white. Ava's F-16 was heading directly for the mountains. It looked like she was making a run for it, but then he saw something else. The bogey, which had been glued to Cobra's tail, had changed its target. It disengaged from the F-35 and was now streaking after Ava's lone, outdated jet. It was faster, much faster. The distance between them was closing rapidly. Rostova, what is your status? The controller asked, his voice tight with concern. The bogey is on your 6. Do you have a visual? Affirmative, Eva replied. Her breathing was even, her voice betraying no fear. I see it. She was intentionally drawing it away from the others. She had made herself the bait. She's bought you some room, Cobra, Razor said. What are your orders? Cobra was silent for a moment, watching the two icons speed toward the mountains. He had been humiliated, outmaneuvered by the bogey, and now ignored by the pilot he had mocked relentlessly. His pride was wounded, but he was still the leader. We stay back and observe, he finally said, his voice low. Let's see what the cargo hauler has in mind. Ava's F-16 was now screaming toward the mountain range. The rocky, barren peaks grew larger in her canopy with terrifying speed. The ground proximity alarm began to blare in the cockpit, a frantic, high-pitched warning. Pull up, pull up. She ignored it. The bogey was almost on top of her now. She could feel the turbulence from its passage as it settled in behind her, perfectly mimicking her every move. It was waiting, studying her, just as it had with the others. She's not going to make it, Slick whispered over the comes up, a sense of horror in his voice. She's flying straight into that cliff. Colonel Thompson gripped the edge of his console. Captain Rostova, talk to me. What is your intention? There was no reply, only the sound of her steady breathing and the incessant shriek of the proximity alarm. She was just seconds from impact. The sheer rock face of the mountain filled her entire view. There was nowhere to go. To the pilots watching on radar, to the men in the control room, this was it. She had lost control, or lost her nerve. This was not a maneuver. This was a crash. Then, her calm voice cut through the tension, a simple, chilling statement that made the blood run cold in everyone who heard it. I have a solution. With that, she pushed the control stick forward. The tin can didn't pull. Up it didn't bank left or right. It nosed down, plunging into an impossible dive, straight toward the jagged rocks and deep shadows of the canyon floor below. It looked like a deliberate, final act, a suicide run. The bogey locked onto her. Movements followed without hesitation, diving right after her into the dark, narrow chasm from which there appeared to be no escape. The tin can plummeted toward the earth, the force of the dive pressing Eva deep into her seat. The roar of the wind outside the canopy was deafening, and the ground rushed up to meet her with sickening speed. Over the coms, there was nothing but stunned silence. The other pilots, the controller, Colonel Thompson, they were all watching the two radar icons, Ava's and the bogies, merge with the terrain and disappear. She's gone. It was Slick's voice, barely a whisper. She just flew into the ground. Cobra didn't say anything. He just stared at his own radar screen, at the spot where his most troublesome pilot had vanished. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. It wasn't guilt, not yet. It was a cold, confusing mix of shock and a strange, unwelcome flicker of respect. She hadn't panicked. Her last words were too calm, too deliberate. On the ground, Colonel Thompson grabbed a microphone. Search and rescue. Scramble. I want a helicopter airborne now. Location. He paused, his own voice thick with emotion. But then, the controller gasped. Sir, wait. Look. He pointed a trembling finger at the main display. A single icon had reappeared. It was hugging the canyon floor, moving at a speed that should have been impossible in such a tight space, but it was there. It was Eva. She's alive, the controller breathed. But where's the bogey? In the canyon, Eva was in her element. This was a world of instinct and reflex, of feeling the air and knowing your machine's limits. The digital precision of the F-35s was useless here. This was analog flying. This was stick and rudder. This was her language. She had used the dive to mask her movements. By dropping below the canyon rim, she had momentarily broken the bogey's line of sight and, more importantly, the data link it had with whatever was controlling it. For a split second, the bogey was blind. That's all she needed. Instead of trying to outrun it, she did the last thing it would expect. She slammed on the air brakes and cut the throttle. The tin can, a plane not known for its subtlety, shuddered violently, its speed dropping in a heartbeat. The maneuver was brutal, something no flight computer would ever allow. It was like throwing an anchor out of a race car. The bogey, which had been anticipating a high-speed chase, shot past her, its advanced programming unable to process the sudden, clumsy change in velocity. For the first time, Eva got a clear look at it. It wasn't a foreign fighter. It had no cockpit, no pilot. It was sleek, black, and triangular, highly advanced unmanned aerial vehicle. A drone, but unlike any drone she had ever seen now, she was on its tail. All right, old girl, she whispered, her hands dancing over the controls. Let's dance. She was in its world now, a narrow twisting labyrinth of rock. She pushed the tin can through turns that strained the airframe to its limits, the wings groaning in protest. The bogey tried to shake her, using its superior agility to twist and turn, but Eva was relentless. She wasn't flying against the drone. She was flying with the canyon. She used the rock walls to hem it in, cutting off its escape routes, forcing it down a path of her choosing. The other pilots, now circling high above, could only listen to the drama unfolding over the comms tower. This is Rostova, she said, her voice still impossibly calm, though her breathing was slightly heavier. I have the bogey in my sights. It appears to be a domestic unmanned aircraft. Experimental design. She's on its tail, Razor said in disbelief. How is that possible? Cobra's eyes were glued to his display as Ava's icon shadowed the bogies through the maze. Kenyon, she wasn't just on its tail. She was hurting it. I'm going to attempt to disable its primary propulsion without destroying the airframe, Eva announced. Rostova, your orders are to destroy the target, Cobra barked, reasserting his authority. Negative, Major, Eva replied coolly. If this is one of ours, we need to know why it went rogue. Firing a missile in this canyon is too risky. The collateral damage would be unpredictable. She was right, and Cobra knew it. Firing a sidewinder in this confined space could bring half the mountain down. But for her to defy a direct order so brazenly, Eva lined up her shot. She wasn't using missiles. She was using the tin can's old-school 20mm cannon. It required getting dangerously close, and it demanded surgical precision. A few inches off, and she could hit a fuel line and turn the drone into a fireball. She took a deep breath, steadied her hands, and squeezed the trigger. A short, controlled burst of cannon fire erupted from the F-16's nose. The shells ripped through the air, striking the drone not in its center mass, but at the very edge of its engine housing. It was a masterful shot, the equivalent of a sniper hitting a target's weapon instead of the person holding it. Sparks and smoke erupted from the drone's engine. It wobbled, its advanced aerodynamics failing it. It lost speed, began to list to one side, and then, its engine sputtering out completely, it started to glide. It was disabled, not destroyed. Target is neutralized, Eva reported calmly. It's gliding down toward the desert floor, sending coordinates for the recovery team. She pulled the tin can up out of the canyon, the old jet climbing into the bright sunlight as if emerging from the underworld. She rejoined the formation, sliding into her position as if nothing had happened. The flight back to Creech was silent. No one spoke. There were no jokes, no sarcastic comments. The three F-35 pilots kept stealing glances at the old beat-up F-16 flying beside them. They had just witnessed something that their simulators and training manuals could never have prepared them for. They had seen a master at work. When they landed, the ground crew was already buzzing with the story. As Eva climbed out of the tin can's cockpit, Specialist Miller rushed up to her, his eyes wide with awe. "Ma'am, I've never seen flying like that." Eva just gave him a small, tired smile. The old girl did all the work. Cobra and the other pilots approached, their helmets under their arms. The usual arrogance was gone from Cobra's face, replaced by a look of grudging confusion. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. What could he say? She had saved his skin, defied his orders, and done the impossible in a plane he had written off as junk. Before he could find his voice, a jeep screeched to a halt beside them. A stern-faced air policeman stepped out. "Captain Rostova, Colonel. Thompson wants to see you now." The walk to the colonel's office was a walk of shame in reverse. Everyone she passed, pilots, mechanics, administrative staff, stopped and stared. The whispers that had followed her on her first day were back, but this time, they were different. They were filled with awe and disbelief. She expected a reprimand, a severe dressing down for disobeying a direct order, for endangering herself and a valuable piece of equipment. She was ready for it. She entered Colonel Thompson's office and stood at attention. He was standing by the window, his back to her, looking out at the desert. "Close the door," he said, his voice quiet and heavy. Eva did as she was told. The click of the latch echoed in the silent room. Thompson turned around. His face was pale, his expression unreadable. He wasn't angry, he looked shaken. He walked to his desk and picked up a thick, black file folder. It was unmarked, with no official seals, just a single red stamp on the cover that read classified. He opened it, he took out a faded black and white photograph and laid it on the desk, pushing it toward her. It was a picture of a group of pilots, younger, standing in front of a strange, black, angular jet that Eva had never seen before. In the center of the group was a much younger woman, her face confident and smiling, her arm around a younger, less weary-looking Colonel Thompson. Eva stared at the woman in the photo. It was her, the Valkyrie program, Thompson said, his voice barely a whisper, a Black Ops unit flying experimental aircraft. Officially, it never existed. The program was shut down 5 years ago after the incident. He looked up from the photo, his eyes locking onto hers. There was a deep, sorrowful recognition in them. The official report said there were no survivors. Every pilot was listed as killed in action. He took a deep breath, his composure cracking for the first time. "Eva, I was your CO. I wrote that report. I thought you were dead." The air in Colonel Thompson's office grew thick and heavy, charged with the weight of a past that was supposed to have been buried. Eva stared at the photograph, at the ghost of her younger self. The smile on that woman's face felt like it belonged to someone else, from another lifetime. The Valkyrie program, a name she hadn't allowed herself to think about for 5 long years. "Sir," Eva began, her voice steady despite the storm of memories brewing inside her. "With all due respect, I think you have me confused with someone else. My name is Eva Rostova. I was a C-130 transport pilot." Thompson shook his head slowly, a sad smile touching his lips. "You can drop the act, Captain. Or should I say, Spectre. That was your calcony, wasn't it? Only one pilot could do what you just did in that canyon. Only one pilot one ever knew could make an F-16 dance like that. I should have known the moment I saw your transfer request." He sank into his chair, the exhaustion of the years evident on his face. "When the incident happened over the Persian Gulf, when we lost everyone, the official story was a catastrophic equipment failure. The program was scrubbed from the records. The pilots, you and the others, were declared dead. It was a clean slate, a cover-up." Eva remained silent, her posture rigid. She had lived by that cover story. It had been her shield, the price she paid for a second chance at a quiet life. "I never believed the official report," Thompson continued, his voice low. "I knew what those planes could do. I knew what you could do. But my superiors, and their superiors made it very clear that I was to accept the findings and move on. So I did. I buried it. I buried you." He looked up at her, his eyes pleading for understanding. "When your transfer came through, with a file so heavily redacted it was mostly black ink, I had a suspicion. I pulled some old strings, called in favors I thought were long expired. I wanted you here, at Creech, a quiet post, a place where nobody would look twice. I thought I could give you a chance to just be a pilot again, without the ghosts. I don't want to talk about it, sir," Eva said, her voice sharp. "You don't have a choice anymore." "Eva," Thompson said, his tone hardening, "didn't just disable a drone out there. You embarrassed some very powerful people. That drone was the prototype for the Aegis program. It's being developed by Ether Dynamics, one of the biggest defense contractors in the world." Ether Dynamics. The name sent a chill down Eva's spine. They were more than a contractor. They had their tendrils deep inside the Pentagon, with lobbyists and retired generals on their payroll. They were untouchable. "The Aegis is supposed to be the future of aerial combat," Thompson explained. "A drone that can outfly any human pilot. They've poured billions into it. They've promised Congress it's infallible. And you, in a 40-year-old F-16 you call the tin can, just proved it's not." The pieces began to click into place. The bogey's impossible maneuvers, its ability to predict the F-35's actions. It wasn't just reading the flight computers. It was likely networked into them, using their own data against them. But the tin can. The tin can was analog. It was off the grid. It was a ghost, just like its pilot. They can't let the truth get out, Thompson said grimly. They can't admit their multi-billion-dollar super drone was taken down by a cargo pilot in a museum piece. They will bury this. And they will bury you to do it. A heavy silence settled between them. Ava's quiet life was over. By proving her skill, she had painted a target on her back. What do you want from me, Colonel? She asked. I want you to be careful, he said. Watch your back. These people don't play by the rules of engagement. They play for keeps. Eva left the office and walked back into the bright Nevada sun. The world felt different now. The whispers she heard as she passed were no longer just about her flying. They were tinged with a new kind of curiosity, a suspicion that there was more to her story. Cobra and his wingman saw her from a distance and quickly looked away, gathering in a tight huddle. They were talking about her. She was no longer just the outsider. She was an enigma, and that was far more dangerous. The next morning, the atmosphere on the base had shifted entirely. A team of civilians in dark suits had arrived. They moved with an unnerving confidence, their faces grim and unsmiling. They were from Ether Dynamics. They, along with a stern-faced two-star general from the Pentagon, immediately took over the investigation. The wreckage of the drone had been recovered overnight, and it, along with Ava's F-16, was now under armed guard in a sealed hangar. Ava was grounded, pending a formal inquiry. She found Specialist Miller near the barracks, looking nervous. Ma'am, he said, his voice low. Those spooks in the suits. They're all over your plane. They wouldn't let me near it. They're taking it apart, piece by piece. It's okay, Miller, Eva reassured him. It's standard procedure. But she knew it wasn't. They weren't investigating what went wrong with their drone. They were looking for a way to blame her. That evening, the first move was made. As Eva was heading back to her quarters, Cobra stopped her. His usual arrogance was gone, replaced by a cold, formal hostility. My men and I have filed a formal complaint, Rostova, he said, refusing to meet her eyes. You disobeyed a direct order. You flew recklessly, endangering the entire squadron. Your hot-dogging in that canyon could have gotten us all killed. Eva stared at him, her expression unreadable. Is that what you believe, Major? Or is that what you were told to believe? A flicker of doubt crossed Cobra's face before he hardened it again. I'm a squadron leader. I followed the chain of command. You went off the reservation. You're unstable. You don't belong here. He was their pawn. Ether Dynamics was using his pride and his position to build their case against her. He was making it easy for them. The next day, things escalated. Eva returned to her room after a mandatory and pointless psychological evaluation to find the door slightly ajar. Her heart pounded in her chest. She entered cautiously. The room was a mess. Her locker had been forced open, its metal door bent and twisted. Her few personal belongings were tossed around the room. They hadn't been looking for anything personal. She knew exactly what they had taken. She walked over to her flight helmet, which was sitting on her bunk. Tucked into the lining was a small slot for a data recorder, a personal device she used to log her flights. It was a habit from the old days, a way of keeping her own records. The recorder was gone. It contained all the telemetry from her flight, her speed, her altitude, her maneuvers, every stick movement, every press of a button. It was the raw, unfiltered truth of what happened in that canyon. And now, it was in their hands. They could alter it, edit it, make it say whatever they wanted. They could turn her masterful flying into a series of reckless, near-fatal errors. She was being framed. A knock on her door made her jump. It was Colonel Thompson. He took one look at the ransacked room, and his face went grim. They're not wasting any time, he said. They took my flight recorder, Eva said, her voice flat. Thompson swore under his breath. The formal inquiry is scheduled for 0800 tomorrow. General Peterson is presiding. Peterson? Eva asked. The same General Peterson who sits on the board of Ether Dynamics' parent company. The very same, Thompson confirmed. It's a kangaroo court, Eva. They're going to crucify you. He looked at her, a deep sense of helplessness in his eyes. I'll testify for you. I'll tell them what I know. They'll crush you, sir, Eva said. They'll end your career? Some things are more important than a career, he replied fiercely. But they both knew it was a losing battle. It was her word, and Thompson's against a mountain of doctored evidence and the full weight of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. She had been a ghost for 5 years. Now, they were going to make sure she disappeared for good. The walls were closing in, and every escape route was being sealed off. She was trapped, with the truth being twisted into a weapon that would be used to destroy her. The hearing room was cold and sterile, bathed in the unflattering fluorescent light of military bureaucracy. At the head of a long table sat General Peterson, a man whose face seemed permanently set in a scowl of stern disapproval. Flanking him were 2 other high-ranking officers, their faces impassive. It was a panel of judges, but Eva knew they were a firing squad. In the gallery behind her sat a handful of people, a few stone-faced men in suits from Ether Dynamics, a nervous-looking Colonel Thompson and Major Cobra Sullivan, who sat with his arms crossed, refusing to look at her. The inquiry began as expected. The prosecutor, a sharp-faced major from the JAG Corps, laid out the case. He painted a picture of Captain Eva Rostova as a reckless, insubordinate pilot with a history of emotional instability and narrative, conveniently supported by the psychologist's report from the previous day. And then came the centerpiece of their argument. The data from Eva's flight recorder. On a large screen, they played a simulation of the flight, supposedly generated from her own data. It was a grotesque distortion of the truth. The simulation showed her plane wobbling uncontrollably, making erratic turns, and diving into the canyon not as a deliberate maneuver, but as a panicked, out-of-control plunge. Her precise cannon shot was depicted as a wild spray of bullets, a lucky hit in a flurry of incompetence. Eva watched the fabrication without flinching, her face a mask of calm. Inside, a cold anger was building. They weren't just trying to ruin her career, they were defiling her art, twisting her skill into a mockery. Then Cobra was called to the stand. He recounted the events, his testimony sticking rigidly to the official narrative. He described Eva's actions as unpredictable and dangerous. He spoke of her unsettling calm on the radio as a sign of detachment, not control. He was a good soldier, following the script he'd been given. He was selling his integrity for the sake of his career, and perhaps he had even convinced himself he was telling the truth. When it was Colonel Thompson's turn, he did his best. He spoke of Eva's exemplary record, her undeniable skill. He tried to introduce the context of the Valkyrie program, to explain that Eva was no ordinary pilot. General Peterson cut him off. Colonel, we are here to discuss the events of 2 days ago, not some unsubstantiated fantasy from a defunct, classified program that, for the record, never existed. Stick to the facts at hand, or I will hold you in contempt. Thompson was silenced. He sat down, defeated, casting an apologetic look at Eva. Finally, Eva was called to testify. She walked to the stand, her footsteps echoing in the silent room. She answered the prosecutor's questions with simple, direct honesty. Captain, did you or did you not disobey a direct order from your squadron leader? I did. Did you or did you not fly your aircraft into a dangerous canyon, in direct violation of standard safety protocols? I did. And did you or did you not discharge your weapon without authorization from the chain of command? I did. With each admission, she could feel the noose tightening. She was confirming their narrative, giving them the rope they needed to hang her. The men from Ether Dynamics smirked. General Peterson looked down at her with cold satisfaction. They had her. She was finished. I have no further questions, the prosecutor said, sitting down with a triumphant air. General Peterson looked at Eva. Captain Rostova, this is a very serious matter. We have testimony from your superior officer and irrefutable data from your own flight recorder that paint a picture of gross negligence. Before this panel makes its recommendation, do you have anything at all to say in your defense? This was it. The moment she was supposed to beg, to make excuses, to break. Eva took a slow breath. She looked not at the general, but at the other 2 officers on the panel, trying to see if there was a flicker of doubt, a hint of integrity behind their stoic masks. She saw nothing. General, she said, her voice clear and steady. The data you have presented from my flight recorder is a fabrication. It has been altered. Peterson scoffed. A baseless accusation. Captain, are you suggesting a conspiracy that officers of the United States Air Force and our trusted civilian partners would tamper with evidence? I am not suggesting it, sir, Eva replied. I am stating it. As a fact, a murmur went through the room. This was defiance on a level they had not expected. An extraordinary claim requires extraordinary proof, Captain, Peterson said dismissively, and you have none. This inquiry is adjourned for a 10-minute recess. When we return, we will deliver our findings. He banged the gavel, and the panel stood up and filed out of the room. It was over. Eva remained seated, a profound sense of isolation washing over her. Thompson came over and put a hand on her shoulder. I'm sorry, Eva. I did everything I could. I know, sir. Thank you, she said quietly. As the room emptied, leaving only Eva Thompson and the armed guards at the door, she saw a movement out of the corner of her eye. It was Specialist Miller, the young mechanic. He was hovering nervously by the doorway, looking back and forth as if afraid of being seen. He clutched a small gray object in his hand. He caught Eva's eye, and with a surge of courage, he walked quickly toward her. Ma'am, he whispered, his voice trembling. I have to tell you something. The night they took your plane apart, I was on late-night duty. I saw them. The suits, they had their own tech with them. He was talking quickly, the words tumbling out. They pulled your recorder, but they were sloppy. They were so focused on your personal unit, they missed the other one. Eva looked at him, confused. The other one. The tin can. Ma'am, Miller said, a proud grin fighting through his fear. She's old school. She doesn't have just one black box like the new jets. She has backups, redundancies. There's an old maintenance recorder, hardwired deep inside the fuselage. It's not on any of the modern schematics. They wouldn't even know to look for it. It logs everything, raw and unencrypted, for diagnostic purposes. His hand shot out, and he pressed the small gray object into her palm. It was a data chip. I pulled it this morning before they sealed the hangar for good. he whispered urgently. I saw who went into your quarters. Ma'am, it wasn't a pilot. It was one of the suits from Ether Dynamics. They're framing you. I know they are. Eva stared at the chip in her hand. It felt heavy, like the weight of the world. It was the truth. The raw, unedited, undeniable truth. But how could she use it? The inquiry was over. The verdict was all but delivered. They'll destroy you for this. Miller, Eva said, her voice filled with concern for the young man. Some things are more important than a career. Ma'am, he said, echoing Colonel Thompson's words. He gave her a quick, nervous nod, then turned and hurried out of the room before he could be seen. Eva closed her hand around the data chip. A spark of hope, fierce and bright, ignited within her. The game wasn't over yet. They thought they had her cornered. They thought she was a ghost they could easily exorcise. But they had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated her, and they had underestimated her plane. The door opened, and the bailiff called out, "All rise." General Peterson and the panel filed back in, their faces grim and self-important. They sat down, and Peterson picked up a sheet of paper. This was it. The verdict. Captain Rostova, he began, his voice booming with false authority. This panel has reached a unanimous decision. He stopped, looking up annoyed. Eva was not standing meekly before him. She had risen from her chair and was walking toward the front of the room. General Peterson, she said, her voice cutting through the silence with newfound strength, before you deliver that verdict, I request the opportunity to present new evidence. Peterson stared at her, momentarily speechless at her audacity. A smug, cruel smile spread across his face. He looked at the Ether Dynamics executives, who shrugged. What could she possibly have? They had controlled every piece of the puzzle. Let her squirm. Let her have her final, desperate moment. Very well, Captain, he said, leaning back in his chair with theatrical indulgence. The panel will grant you one last chance to make your case. Let's see your new evidence. The room was thick with a tense, expectant silence. General Peterson's condescending smile was a clear challenge. He and his corporate allies were confident, certain that whatever Eva was about to present would be nothing more than a final, desperate gasp. Desperate Eva stood before the panel, the small data chip concealed in her closed fist. She looked at the screen where they had played the doctored simulation of her flight. General, she began, her voice ringing with a newfound confidence that startled the room. My defense does not rest on a data chip that you would undoubtedly dismiss as another fabrication. My defense rests on something more fundamental, skill. A confused murmur rippled through the gallery. Cobra leaned forward in his seat, a frown creasing his brow. The prosecution, with the help of Ether Dynamics, has argued that my success in disabling the Aegis drone was a fluke, Eva continued, her eyes locking onto Peterson's. They claim it was the result of panicked, reckless flying in an unstable aircraft. They have presented a simulation to prove this. I propose a different kind of simulation, a live one. Peterson's smirk faltered. What are you talking about, Captain? I challenge Major Sullivan to a live flight simulation, Eva announced, turning her gaze to Cobra. Right here, right now, we will recreate the exact scenario. The same airspace, the same mountain range, the same rogue drone. Cobra shot to his feet. That's absurd, but Eva said, raising her voice to cut him off. There will be one small change. Her eyes gleamed with a dangerous light. Major Sullivan will not be flying his state-of-the-art F-35. He will fly the simulation in my F-16. He will fly the tin can. The room erupted in chatter. The audacity of the proposal was breathtaking. And what will you be flying, Captain? Peterson asked, his voice laced with suspicion. I'll take his F-35, Eva said simply. The implication was a thunderclap. She was claiming that the plane didn't matter. She was so confident in her own ability that she was willing to give her opponent the perceived advantage, just to prove her point. It was a public, undeniable challenge to the very core of their argument. Peterson was trapped. The inquiry was, in theory, a search for the truth. To deny such a direct, empirical test in front of other officers would be a blatant admission that he was afraid of the outcome. His eyes darted to the Ether Dynamics executives. They gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. They still believed their narrative. They believed Sullivan, the hotshot ace, could easily outperform the cargo pilot, no matter the aircraft. Fine, Peterson snapped, his face flushed with anger. Let's have your little circus act, Captain. The base simulators are linked. We can run it on the main screen for everyone to see. Major Sullivan, you are so ordered. Cobra looked pale. He was being forced to defend his honor, and the honor of his squadron, in a plane he had openly mocked as a piece of junk. But to refuse was to admit cowardice. Yes, sir, he muttered, casting a venomous glare at Eva. Minutes later, the main screen flickered to life, showing the two simulated cockpits side by side. On the left was Cobra, his face tight with concentration inside the analog cockpit of the F-16. On the right was Eva.com, and relaxed in the sleek, digital cockpit of the F-35. The simulation began. The rogue drone appeared, just as it had in real life. Cobra, in the F-16, moved to engage. But he was clumsy. The old jet didn't respond with the smooth, computer-assisted grace he was used to. It was a wild horse, and he was struggling to stay in the saddle. He overcorrected his turns, stalled in a climb, and found himself constantly outmaneuvered by the drone. The tin can, which had been a surgical tool in Ava's hands, was a blunt instrument in his. He couldn't get a lock. He couldn't get on its tail. He was, in a word, failing. The entire room watched in stunned silence as their ace pilot was made to look like a novice. I can't control it, Cobra stammered over the simulated comms. His frustration, mounting the aircraft is unstable. Then, Ava's voice, calm and clear, came through the speakers. The aircraft is fine, Major. You just have to listen to it. With that, she moved her F-35. A machine designed for technological superiority became an extension of her will. She didn't just replicate her previous flight. She surpassed it. She performed the canyon dive with even more grace. Her control, absolute. She used the F-35's advanced systems not as a crutch, but as a tool, combining her raw instinct with cutting-edge technology. She got on the drone's tail in half the time, her maneuvers a breathtaking display of artistry and power. Lined up her simulated shot. This is for the record, she said, her voice cold as ice. Instead of just disabling the drone, she performed a series of microbursts from her cannon, surgically slicing off one wing, then the other, before finally taking out the engine. The drone, now just a falling fuselage, was completely and utterly defeated. She had not only beaten it, she had dissected it. The simulation ended. A heavy, profound silence filled the room. No one could deny what they had just seen. It wasn't the plane, it was the pilot. As the lights in the room came up, Eva stood, holding the small data chip between her thumb and forefinger. Now for the proof, she said, her voice resonating with authority. She walked to the prosecutor's table, took the data cable he had used for his own presentation, and plugged the chip into the system. This is the unedited maintenance log from the F-16's hardwired recorder. Let's see how it compares to the official evidence. She hit play. On the screen, a new simulation appeared. This one was raw, filled with lines of telemetry and data, but the flight path was unmistakable. It showed her flight exactly as it had happened: the controlled dive, the precise braking, the expert maneuvering, the single, perfect shot. It was the undeniable, unalterable truth. When played side by side with the doctored footage, the fraud was laughably obvious. General Peterson's face went from red to ashen white. The Ether Dynamics executives began gathering their papers, trying to look invisible. But Eva wasn't finished. The data chip contained more than just flight telemetry. It also contained the audio logs from the ground crew's maintenance channels. She clicked another file. Specialist Miller's voice, clear as a bell, filled the room. It was his own log entry from the night of the incident. Saw the civilian contractors remove the captain's personal recorder. They had their own equipment, seemed more interested in that than the actual aircraft systems. Something's not right here. It was over. The conspiracy, so carefully constructed, had crumbled to dust in a matter of minutes. Colonel Thompson stood up, his voice booming with righteous fury. General Peterson, as the commanding officer of this base, I am hereby launching a full investigation into ether dynamics and potential evidence tampering by officers on this panel. I am formally requesting the Inspector General's office take over. Guards, secure the room. No one leaves. The men in suits were frozen in their seats. Cobra stared at the floor, the full weight of his humiliation crashing down on him. He hadn't just been beaten, he had been exposed as a pawn. His pride used to prop up a lie. The final scene was weeks later. The investigation had blown the lid off a massive corruption scandal, leading to congressional hearings and the cancellation of the Aegis drone contract. General Peterson was forced into early retirement, his career ending in disgrace. Eva was no longer at Crete. Her name, and her legend, had been resurrected from the ashes. She stood on the tarmac of a different base, a secret installation in the California desert. In front of her sat a new aircraft, a machine so advanced and otherworldly it made the F-35 look like a biplane. It was the successor to the Valkyrie program. A group of pilots, the true elite of the Air Force, stood nearby. When they looked at her, there was no mockery, no condescension. There was only one thing in their eyes: awe. Colonel Thompson, now promoted and overseeing the new program, walked up to her. They know who you are now, Spectre. Eva looked at the new jet, then up at the endless blue sky. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. She had been through the fire and emerged, not burned, but forged. She hadn't sought revenge or glory. She had only sought the truth. And in finding it, she had reclaimed not just her name, but her soul. She was no longer a ghost hiding in the quiet places. She was home.